Good afternoon and welcome back to Just Jocelyn. I'm your host, Jocelyn, and my guest again is Laurie Ortolano. Welcome back.
Thank you.
As you know, Laurie is, like I said, a warrior, and it just never ends. She is just one of many of us in the state that are trying to hold our local governments, our school districts, our city halls, and our state accountable, because it's our tax money that pays their salaries. In many cases, they are appointed and then elected by the legislative body, but we never elected them. So when we go for remedy to the legislative branch and we get nothing, which is quite often, when you have no remedy, all you can do is go to court. All you can do, well, there are no lawyers, virtually no lawyers in this state that will work for us, that will help us. So we end up being pro se litigants, representing ourselves, going into Daniel's den of lions, and we get no help, no compassion. We don't get anything. We're insulted, we're threatened. 6 months, 8 months, 9 months go by and nothing is said, hoping that we go away, hoping that we slink away, hoping that somebody will say something so awful and threatening to us that we just pack up and leave. Well, we're not. And we are pushing back, and we are standing for our Bill of Rights, our enumerated rights that are given to us by God and protected by the Constitution. But they throw that all away and just treat us like garbage. And I think that needs to end, and you are in the front lines along with many of my friends pushing back. So let's talk about the federal case about First Amendment.
Yes. So I filed a federal case with an attorney representing me.
Thank you, whoever you are.
Right.
Thank you very much.
So I was fortunate enough. I knew I needed an attorney to go into federal court. I stay in my right to know lane to the best of my ability, just trying to get records on my own. But I really don't veer out of it, and I don't really want to be a lawyer. So I just want to get my records. So I had an attorney. It got filed in August of 22.
Okay. Yep.
So it's been about 2 years, 8 months. It's going to trial. It's going on 3. It's going to trial in April. It's got a scheduled trial date in April.
And that'd be up in Concord.
Yes.
Because it's federal.
Yes. And so I named a lot of defendants. Mm-hmm. A lot of them were still in the case. And they all filed motions for summary judgment. They all filed a motion to the court to be dismissed, claiming that the basis for First Amendment violations wasn't there, and therefore they should not be held accountable. And the first motion for summary judgment was filed by Attorney Bolton and Attorney Leonard. We had them named in the case.
Of course.
I felt very strongly that both those attorneys had acted maliciously, had prosecuted me maliciously when I was arrested, and continued to act in attempting to arrest me and prosecute me maliciously. And it's something that never really stopped.
It's
from
continuous.
2021 to now. Right. Yeah. My access to City Hall is extremely limited. And
but I noticed they still take your property taxes. That takes care of that.
They're more than happy to do that. So, yes. So, and the last segment we did together, I talked about how I had filed that motion to recuse Attorney Leonard and Attorney Bolton.
And that was denied.
And it was denied. It took a long time. And I was reviewing that just today and walking down memory lane of all the things that had happened, because I wrote a very detailed filing, which I'm thankful I did now, because it's all very organized and fresh.
Well, you can go back and read it, and it comes back.
There.
Sometimes when you don't, you're dragging
I created all the exhibits, so the whole thing is a big story.
Yep.
And so we filed. So they filed a motion to dismiss, saying there was no basis to say that they had anything to do with the police department arresting me, and that the police operate independently, and there was nothing there. I got this ruling on Valentine's Day last week. It was really one of my best gifts. And it gave me hope.
It's a beautiful thing.
It gave me hope. It gives me an opportunity to have my trial and to have a jury determine whether or not there was First Amendment violations in unlawful acts committed by both city lawyers in playing a role in ordering the arrest.
Yep.
And
so being the wife of a police officer and for 34 years, I am absolutely mind blown with the evidence from the police officers and the police chief.
Right.
That the whole table flipped.
Right.
I mean, evidence is, again, I go back to black and white,
right
and wrong.
Right.
And you've been very clear and upfront, and so were they initially about what was going on. So I'm really, truly gobsmacked.
Yes.
At how those two continued to ferment and just keep throwing stuff at you nonstop and to berate the police department.
Yeah, they had control in a way. I mean, the police budgets are controlled by the city. And so when I was escorted out of City Hall for being in the legal office, trying to get those abatement applications stamped, of course I went peacefully. And the whole write-up, the very public report that's available, will show that I was very peaceful.
And you agreed to leave.
Oh, yeah. And I you know what? I didn't leave when the attorney asked me to leave.
Right.
It was a probationary attorney that was there when I came in. I did not leave when he asked me to leave. And within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, Attorney Leonard walked in. And she came up to me, looked down on me and said, "You're very threatening and hostile."
You just told me to leave.
And I was in the hallway area, the entry hallway of the legal office, not in their main area, not in anyone's office, nothing.
The entrance.
The entry hallway. And she said, "You're very threatening and hostile." She's, "Mindy, call the police." So Mindy calls the police and they get the police on the phone. And when this clerk is on the phone with the police, eventually you can see from the police call that the dispatcher is like, "Well, is she, doing something dangerous? Is she being loud?" No, she's very quiet. She's just sitting there. She's waiting for somebody to help her.
Yeah.
There's no issue.
She wants some paper. Let's bring it down to what it is. You wanted some paper stamped.
That's it.
And the one department over here was closed. You needed these papers, needed them stamped then and there. So you knocked on a door next door and said, "Can you help me?" And I mean, and they lose their minds?
I truly believe they were abatement applications for senior citizens. I was only helping these two women that had medical issues, and it was COVID, and one of them was in her 80s and very non-ambulatory. So it wasn't like I was doing this for everybody. They actually interpreted that I was going to become a representative for every abatement being filed. I think that was in their mind at the time, because the chief, after this happened, was like, "You need to get all the representative paperwork filed for abatements coming in." I said, "I don't know what makes you think I'm representing those. I'm not.
No, you're
I only have
helping
these
two ladies.
There were two people
handicapped ladies,
in a
seniors.
mobile home park that had issues that property assessments are very off." I said, so I did offer to help them. But I'm not doing everyone's. So that's not my job. I mean, I like to help people, and I did help people. But I told them, "You go
very
represent."
specific and limited.
Yeah, and go represent yourself, because I think it's an important process for people to bring their complaints forward, go before the Board of Assessors, present your case, and try to get your property fixed. It's a really important civic thing that you need to do. Plus, you never know when you're going to need to do it again.
Correct.
So you get this experience, and I was happy to show them how to start that experience. So. But these women I helped. And so they misrepresented what I was doing. And I think at that time, looking back on it, that was in their mind. And so I left willingly. When the police came and 5 officers showed up, this was treated like a... 5 cruisers, like a domestic violence call. Oh, and there they trot up with all their gear on, up the stairs, 3rd floor. And they're like talking to me, and a couple of them are saying, "This is ridiculous.
Of course it is.
Stamp it."
And they know better.
Then I could hear Officer Roach around the corner talking to Celia Leonard. She was very peaceable. She didn't say anything nasty, like, "Oh my God." She didn't say she was threatening, even though she said it to me. She wasn't acting poorly. She wasn't swearing or yelling or name calling. And right up on the report.
Well, she probably had the intelligence to know, don't lie to a police officer.
She didn't. So I felt like she said, "I just want her to be asked to leave and not come into City Hall unless she has an appointment." So they took me. out of the building. They said, we need you to leave. I said, of course I'll leave. I'll leave with you.
Yeah.
But you know what? I was actually fearful when she told me, you're threatening. I'm afraid of you, that kind of thing. I thought if I got up and left, she'd break something or tip something over and accuse me of doing it. And I'd have the police at my house.
Yep.
Saying, oh, you broke that chair. Or you broke that vase on the desk.
Right.
You were, acting up and you were angry. I felt like I needed
You did
to
the right
stay.
thing. You needed the right people
I
to be
needed
with
the
you.
police to be there.
Yeah.
I didn't expect
for you.
5.
Yeah.
So they show up. And it was frustrating. And they said to me as I was going down the stairs, I remember this, you need to have an appointment. I said, you know what? I didn't need an appointment for legal. There's offices you need an appointment for. It's listed on the website. It doesn't say you need an appointment for legal. You don't need an appointment to go to the administrative service director's office where I was going. The woman at the door waved me in and said, go, Laurie. It's fine. It's open. Nobody was there. So I was not trying to get into unauthorized spaces. The website didn't say legal was closed.
Yeah.
After it happened, legal said our office was closed to the public. Well, you didn't put any notice up.
Right.
So I would not have known that.
I'd like to question why is legal closed to the public?
Right. And so.
What are you trying to hide?
So I leave, and the police, and then Celia Leonard sends a picture of me to the newspapers, of me in the office. And I talked to the newspapers, and they said, oh, we talked to the police. They wrote an article. There's no issue. This is not an issue. They don't have any problem. It was just gone. And I was like, well, good. That's what I was told. And then maybe 2 weeks later, I get a knock on my door at home from Officer Roach, and he says, we'd like to interview you about what happened in City Hall. And I said, you know what? I'm not comfortable. I need you to call my lawyer. I said, I'm not certain what this is about. And they said, that's fine.
Yep, that's absolutely, you're right.
So they closed the door and they left. And I talked to my lawyer, and he said, this is a bad sign. They're up to something. He goes, I think they're going to arrest you. He goes, I don't think it's right, but he goes, I think this is a bad sign. And he called, and they said, well, we've opened an investigation.
What?
And we're investigating her, and now we got to figure out, and we think there might be a crime here. And
Did they not have body cameras on? Were they not turned on?
they didn't wear them at that point. They had body cameras came in maybe 6 months later, maybe a year later. So I'd say a year later. So I was like, oh, I can't believe this. And then when I got into my federal case and did the depositions, that's when I learned from the chief, the retired Chief Carignan.
Oh, let me guess. Bolton and Leonard came to talk to him.
Called him to come to the legal office upstairs on the 3rd floor. He brought his deputy, and the girl who had been there, Mindy, was there with them. And according to Chief Carignan, Attorney Bolton demanded, he was angry, he was loud, I want her arrested now.
He doesn't have that right.
He did.
By
And
what
he's
authority?
you know what? He has that right all the time, because a year later when I was on the 3rd floor of that thing, he told the police when he said he was going to have me arrested and they showed up, the first things he said to the police in that report was, I want her arrested. And the police said, well, we haven't even investigated. Walk us upstairs and show us what she did. And the officers looked at the 3rd floor and said, this is an open public place. And he pushed for it then, a year later. If he wants you arrested, he just tells the police, arrest her now. And that's the power he's had. Very scary that this man has had.
He has no authority when all is said and done.
Right. So
I just don't understand how the original 5 police officers
saw no
these guys
issue.
are not, they have no issue. They know the law. They know their job.
Yeah.
This is who we trust, and they're supposed to be here for us. But for some lawyer in City Hall to start demanding that when 5 police officers said, we see nothing here, and that's very questionable.
And he claimed that, I was a danger to the staff. And, it was a safety issue for his employees.
Why were you going to, toss some papers at them and they might get a paper cut?
No, I know. So, and then,
I'm horrified.
It was horrifying. So that came out in the deposition that there was this meeting and he demanded it. And the chief said, I'm not arresting her. At that point, he said,
Good
no,
for him.
I'm not doing it. But then Bolton went behind his back and called the prosecutor directly, Brian Kinney. And he said to Brian Kinney, I want you to open this investigation and have her arrested.
Based on what? On Bolton's say-so and Leonard's say-so?
Yes. And so,
but you have an entire department that said that there's nothing here.
So then
Lord.
It got legs. That, I think there's threatening things. I think the city hall has information on certain people they can use against them. They control their budget. People are like, I don't know how long Brian Kinney had been a prosecutor, but there's a lot of people who get into jobs very new, very green, want to be successful.
And do as they're told.
And they're being strong-armed. Mm-hmm. And they're like, okay. So he opened the investigation, and then I heard there was another meeting. Within a few days of that, all the brass in the police department, as well as city hall leaders, had a Zoom meeting. And at that point, they decided to issue the warrant and go to the judge, who was Laurie, to ask him to sign the warrant for the arrest. And it was signed. So on the 16th of February, I got a call from my lawyer saying the warrant's been issued. And the police are going to come and arrest you, but I've asked them to give you a chance to go to the police station and just turn yourself in. So I did. And the articles in the paper after that were Bolton saying, it might have been before that, his statements to the press was that her actions were inspired by the January 6th insurrectionists. And then I got labeled.
No.
Yeah. And that
How
ended
is
up...
that possible,
It
Laurie?
wasn't. It was terrible. It was untrue. It was damaging as heck. He used fear-mongering.
That's inflammatory.
It was personally dangerous to me. It really was, in so many levels.
January 6th insurrection?
Yeah. Right.
Is he on drugs?
You know what? He had just suffered a stroke. So here he had a stroke in December. My visit to his office was January 21st. I think if he had been back at City Hall, he was only back for a week or so. I mean, I don't think he was of sound mind. And he's also always had a history of a really volatile temper.
Well,
it's so much worse.
I can tell you personally, when I attended a recount for Paula Johnson, I actually have it on video.
Oh, yeah.
I think I still have it.
He lost
his ever-loving mind.
Yes.
I remember him taking his arm and shoving me back. He would yell.
Yeah.
He would stand up on the stage and tower over you and yell. He has no control of his emotions.
No.
And he is physically and mentally and verbally abusive man. I've seen him in court. He's the same way.
He is. He's no self-awareness and no self-control. And how does somebody with so little civility end up being the top attorney for the second largest city in the state?
I am so sorry, Laurie.
I know. So that had gone out, and that was just so damaging. And then it allowed a lot of social media posts to go up that called me out as an extreme radical right-wing.
Is that about, not to digress, because I know we're going to run out of time here, but was that about the time that Marilyn Todd was also
she ended
arrested
up
after
me, a couple months later? And look, they dropped her case. She would not cave in. They dropped her case.
Because I think that's how I got to meet you.
Yes. And so, and hers was not a proper prosecution either. At that point, it felt like they were trying to bring women down, and it had a terrible feel.
It definitely had a feel of coming after women that had appointments that were there to do business in their city hall.
Right.
And then what I'm looking at is an abuse of the police department to cement what they wanted.
Right. And so, and the other interesting thing from the depositions that were taken last May that happened was we learned about these meetings taking place. What was really infuriating to me is when I got the police records, obviously you ask for all the records once an investigation is done. And after I was arrested, I wanted all the records. And my attorney asked for all the records. There was no documentation of those meetings occurring.
So it was all
off books
and Zoom,
done.
And I doubt that they pushed the record button on Zoom.
They didn't record, and nobody wrote a report. A police officer is supposed to write a report. On this day at this time, we had an interview, we had a meeting, we did this. Nobody wrote a report about these two meetings. So they were never in there, that Attorney Bolton and Leonard
guess what?
pushed
They
for
never
that.
occurred.
Right. That's what happened.
Sorry.
And
it never occurred.
Yeah. So, And, you know, in the deposition, Attorney Bolton denied ever advocating for my arrest. We had
No, he only just yelled it loudly and
right. And so that's an issue that I can take up.
Yep.
And the other thing is what this federal judge noted is that Attorney Leonard noted when she was the officer who interviewed her noted that she said, hey, I've received hundreds of emails from Laurie Ortolano and right-to-know requests, and she has a history with the city as well as pending lawsuits against the city. And she was a vocal critic of city officials at public meetings, and Attorney Leonard was among the city employees Ortolano had publicly criticized. That's what she said. That became her reason to push for the arrest. I was a critic.
So what? That's the freedom of speech.
And that's where they cross the line.
That's one of your enumerated rights.
That's where the First Amendment violations get to be looked at by a jury. And that was where I always felt they crossed the line.
Yep.
And she cited the case of Gonzalez. I can't remember
Page
who.
8.
Page 8. Gonzalez versus
Supreme Court
Trevino.
fully explained, yep.
Yeah, that came out last year, right at the time the summary judgments were coming out. This was the older lady who ran for city council in Texas. She got on the council and she put together a petition to remove a city official, maybe a councilman who she felt was up to no good. Mm-hmm. And she had the support of people and she had a petition signed and she took it to a council meeting and she addressed it, and there was a lot of tension in the meeting because of what she was doing, obviously. Yep. When the meeting ended and she pulled all her papers together, she forgot to hand the petition into the clerk. She just put her papers together. There was an RSA that said that she was doctoring and altering documents that were now part of the public record. And so they arrested her the next day for violation of this statute, a statute never really used.
Yep.
She ended up going to the Supreme Court and they ruled that it was a malicious arrest, driven by the fact that she was a critic of her government and she was putting together this petition to address a government official that she did not think was proper. And that was a huge case for me because that's really fell right in line with exactly what happened with me. Exactly.
So fast forward, because we have 4 minutes and I want people to know what's going on exactly. So this you've
survives.
got a decision.
So I got a decision that allows me to take this in front of a jury and have my very good trial attorney, who I do have a really talented trial attorney,
Excellent.
and I'm lucky to present to a jury to let a jury determine whether this was a malicious act. There's 5 other motions for summary judgment that the federal court has to rule on, and I'm hoping I get favorable rulings on a couple more.
Okay.
I stand a shot. If I don't, it's a great ruling for me to address the nature of these city lawyers and how they conducted themselves and how they treat citizens who are just trying to access public records. So I'm really, really happy with the way this worked out. And that was a nice Valentine's gift.
I was just going to say, what a beautiful Valentine's gift.
Because I couldn't
So this is a defamation. Is this a defamation case?
It's a First Amendment case.
First Amendment.
It's a First Amendment rights case. And another part of it is a defamation claim.
Okay.
And so
in a way, you can see that these city and town attorneys,
they are
by
rogue.
abusing their rights and threatening people and using, and I truly say using the police to arrest citizens for their benefit, also that they can, sneak out of this, slide and slither away from. It's our right to know. Yeah. And we have the right to audit what our government is doing. And we're seeing this at the federal level. Right. And it's absolutely horrendous that we as citizens, taxpayers, who gave them the authority to begin with, because it comes from we the people. Right. And the Constitution protects our rights, but these individuals are tearing them down because they've got some burr up their bum.
Oh yeah. Well, they have an agenda, and it's their agenda. It's not our agenda. And, we are interfering with their agenda. And that's really the problem. They're self-serving people, not public-serving people.
Correct.
And that is the problem.
What? When you mess with the people, when you mess with God, and you mess with family, you may not like what happens.
No.
And that's not a threat. That is, we will use your words, we will use the law to hold you in check. And you don't like it? This is not Germany.
No, I know, and it's felt like it's becoming it. I mean, there's so much to do to reverse this and to get a state that's more progressive and to ferret out the dishonor and the corruption in the legal judicial system. I think it's really significant.
Well, it is. I think there's over $938 billion of money flows through this state with the various hundreds of LLCs.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder, why is there so much money flowing through our state? Why are there so many attorneys? Why is there just so much secrecy and beating up of citizens just to have the right thing done?
Right.
Just to follow the law.
Yeah.
So we're waiting to hear on the summary judgments on the remaining.
This week I could get a few more. This week, next week I
and
should
then
have.
we should know, do you have a date for April for the federal case or
It's
no?
somewhere around, I don't know if the date is fixed
Published yet? Okay.
You know, I'm guessing around April 10th or 15th. And
so will you come back and tell us?
Yes. Yeah.
I will be there.
Because, oh yeah, I will. And I'll get that date out. And, you know, it's a chance for me to be before a jury. And I've wanted to be before a jury. I know now I filed another right to know lawsuit against the city on trust funds and that $70 million of money, which they're furious with me about. But
I think you take care of this. I think that will either clear the pathway or make very apparent
they need
what is wrong.
To get rid of those two attorneys in the legal office. And the mayor won't do it. He just won't do it. And I'm not making that a condition of my negotiations at all.
It's just a fact.
It's a fact, and it's his job to deal with that. And if this is the way the mayor wants to structure his office, because he's not a very honorable or ethical man too as an attorney, then so be it. You can stay with your crooks, but we're going to poke you every time, and we'll keep going back into court. And now, when I go to court, I want a jury trial. I want a jury trial on the bad faith claims. I don't mind letting a judge rule on the basic 91A issues, but when it comes to bad faith and the conduct, a judge is never going to rule against a lawyer. I've learned that for 4 years. They will not rule against their own.
So there you have it, everybody. Again, tons and tons of information, and it's all about our rights and your rights. Never forget that. It's what America was founded on. And we need to never forget that, and we need to stand together, not throw rocks. So thank you for joining me and Laurie Ortolano on Just Jocelyn. We'll see you next time.